In this video, I'm going to walk you through how we paid off $45.5 thousand of debt in less than 6 years. If you're new here, my name is Kaylee, and I use this channel to show a glimpse into all of the different ways that I am making my life more intentional. My hope is that if you follow along, you'll find some ways to add intentionality into your life as well. If you're not new here, you know that I do a monthly video going over what we spent in the month and setting up the budget for the upcoming month. Budgeting and finance is something that became a real passion of mine to be more conscious about towards the end of 2022, beginning of 2023, and then very much so towards the end of 23 and going into 2024 and now 2025 as well. A couple of reasons for that: just one, getting married and combining finances with a partner. My husband and I share 100% of our finances. There is no separate accounts or anything like that. That's how we chose to do it. Not everyone chooses to do it that way, and that's totally fine. And when we got married, I had no student loan debt. The only debt that I had was a car that we purchased together in 2019, but the debt was in my name. My husband came into the marriage with more debt. He came into the marriage with student loan debt specifically. Very luckily, we both came in with no credit card debt, which is huge and a major reason why we were able to pay off the amount we were able to pay off in the time we were able to pay it off. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So firstly, I am using this video as an avenue to talk to you about the way that we attacked our debt and to highlight a couple of common debt payoff methods so that you can determine what might be a good approach, at least to start making a plan to pay off your debt if that's something that you are wanting to do. A couple things to note before we get into the major content of this video is that since we got married in 2020, and even before that on my part, I have always, and we have always, lived below our means, which one, I recognize is a massive privilege to be able to do that. And number two, we have made a very conscious effort to do that. I know that a lot of finance and budget content creators on here have hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings. They go on luxury vacations all of the time and just have money. Just because they have money doesn't actually mean that they manage it well. Managing your money and having money to be able to do things like pay off your debt, to me, is much more substantial, and I would rather have that type of money. So I am not coming to you from that standpoint. I am coming to you from, we live in an apartment, a 1-bedroom apartment with our dog. We have 2 cars, one that was made in 2003 and one that was made in 2017, and we don't spend frivolously. We spend exactly the amount most of the time that we budget or need to spend on different items. The other thing is we are savers. We are very motivated to save money. That is something that my husband learned since being married to me, because he didn't know it was an option before to save money. And I have always been a saver my whole life. We also had the perfect combination of motivation and financial ability to make this happen in the timeline in which it happened and kind of how it happened. Also, during this time frame, we never accrued more debt and we never had credit card debt. So all of our interest rates were 5% or lower. So we weren't dealing with, 25 to 30% interest on any amount of our debt. I'm also not educated or trained in any professional sense when it comes to finances. I'm just passionate about finances, budgeting, and making things happen with the money that we have, even if it's a smaller amount of money, then would make it easier to make some of the things happen that we want to happen. Since 2019, before we got married, we have been working with a financial advisor. He is free to work with. We have never paid him a dime. And that's been a vital component in the amount of information I feel like I now know and I feel confident in knowing around finances and budgeting, especially when it comes to my own money and my own goals. And so if you would like a recommendation for a financial advisor, I'm going to leave ours in the comments below. Like I said, we've been working with him since 2019. And if you need some accountability in keeping to a plan or building a plan or building a plan too, and kind of looking ahead into the future, even if you're fully debt free, I highly recommend talking with a financial advisor, even if it's just one time, to know if you're on track or not for where you want to be. The final thing is this worked because of the amount it was and the interest rates that we had. If this was a much larger amount or we were working with much larger interest rates, I probably would have crafted a different plan. So take into consideration what type of debt you have, the interest rates that you have on debt, and the total amount of your debt. All of this is trial and error too, to see what works best for you. And that's why we kind of created our own approach to debt payoff versus using one of the very traditional methods of debt payoff. I want to give a really quick timeline rundown over the past 6-ish years. So in December 2019, we purchased our car. It was $19,000. We put $1,000 down and took out an $18,000 loan at a 3.1 interest rate, and that loan was a 5-year loan. So if we just made the minimum payment and nothing else, it would be paid off in 5 years. At first, we paid a little bit more than the minimum amount, but we quickly switched that, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. Then in 2020, my husband's student loans was sitting at around $27.5 thousand at a 10-year loan with interest rates ranging from 3.6 to 4.9. In 2020, we had 6 different payments amounting to $2,258.83. Also, the pandemic happened in 2020. So loans were in deferment. However, there were some loans still accruing interest at that time. In 2021, we made 0 payments on the student loans, not a 1. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. In 2022, we made 3 payments amounting to $913.44. Sorry for the blower if you can hear that outside. In 2023, we made 11 payments amounting to $4,331.06. Also in 2023, in August, Jonathan started his master's degree. So his loans went back into deferment. And at that time, we had paid off most of the ones that were still accruing interest. But I think we had maybe one that still accrued interest for a couple of months. In 2024, we made 7 payments amounting to $4,141.12. And in 2025, we made 8 payments amounting to $15,769.76. And as an additional note, in May of 2025, Jonathan graduated with his master's degree and loans started accruing interest again in May. So that is kind of the timeline of paying down the student loans, which sounds really wild when you look at it over the space of those years. And therefore, it kind of shows you there was no real plan. There was no amount we were trying to hit per year. There was just throwing what we could at it when we could, especially during like COVID deferment time, and then deciding last year and this year to get very aggressive in paying it off, which we did. Now I want to give you a little bit of another timeline of all of the things that we were able to do alongside making those payments. In 2020, we were married in February. The pandemic started in March. Loans went into deferment. And over the course of that 1 year, we saved $20,000 in cash. Between 2021 and 2022, we saved $25,000 in cash in a high yield savings account, by the way. Highly recommend a high yield savings account. And because we saved $45,000 in the span of 3 years, in 2021, Jonathan left his job and went and started working at a glass manufacturing company. In February of 2023, Jonathan left the glass manufacturing company and started as a registered behavior technician at an autism center. In July of 2023, I left my job to pursue my own business and part-time work, which was a huge pay cut, by the way, like massive pay cut. And Jonathan leaving the manufacturing company in February of 23 was also a pay cut. In August of 2023, Jonathan started his master's degree at Arizona State University online, and we paid his entire master's degree out of pocket every 3 months. We had like a $4,700 payment every 3 months until he graduated. And so our savings went down because of that, but we avoided a loan with a 15 to 17% interest rate because that is where graduate student loans were sitting at when we would have needed to take out a loan to cover the cost of his schooling. So we lost some savings, but we completely paid off a $20,000 master's degree, all while also making some payments on the student loans and our normal monthly payment on our car loan. In May of 2025, Jonathan graduated with his master's, and in July of 2025, he became a board-certified behavior analyst, which came with a pretty pay raise at work. And that is when we have decided to get aggressive about paying off the remainder $14,000 on his undergrad student loans. We did this within 3 months. In July, we made a massive payment of around $6,000 or $7,000, and in September of 2025, we paid the remainder off on that loan. Again, this was tapping into our savings. We did not make enough to cover that amount in either of those months. We pulled it from savings and applied it to the loan to take care of our debt. However, now the only interest accruing is the interest accruing in our high yield savings account, which is money to us, not money we're losing. So looking back, especially that 1 year of 2021, where we made absolutely no payments whatsoever, are there things that I might have done differently that may have helped us, one, not have to pay off so much in 2025, or just to pay it off sooner or differently? Maybe. But then I look at that second timeline that I gave you of all of the things that we were able to do, and we were able to do with confidence because we had savings. I would not have been able to leave my job, and I was incredibly depressed and unwell and needed to leave my job. But if we didn't have savings, I wouldn't have. I would have stayed. Jonathan was able to leave 2 jobs in the span of this time, and he wouldn't have been able to do that if we didn't have the savings that we had. We wouldn't have been able to send him to school for his master's degree, or we would have, and we would be sitting at a 15 to 17% interest rate loan right now if we didn't have the savings that we had. So looking back, I wouldn't have done it differently. I wouldn't have paid off the debt faster because having the amount in cash savings that we had was a huge benefit to us being able to live life well while also being conscious of the fact that we wanted to be debt-free as soon as possible. Now I want to share with you 2 of the major debt payoff methods that are out there in the finance world, and then also what we did, which was kind of a combination of both and a little bit of none of them as well. The first one is the avalanche method. Step 1 of the avalanche method is to list your debts, and you're going to list them from the highest interest amount to the lowest interest amount. Then you're going to continue to make minimum payments on all of your loans, but any additional money or payments that you make, you're going to make to the loan with the highest interest amount, even if it's a smaller amount than some of the others, so therefore those larger amounts might be accruing more interest. The idea here is to take care of the largest interest amount first and work your way down to the smallest interest amount regardless of how much the loan is. And then you just rinse and repeat this. Once the highest interest rate is paid off, you go to the next highest with any additional money or payments that you're going to make towards your loans. This is a really great method to use if you are worried about the amount of accrual of interest over time, but it's not as motivating if you need small wins along the way, because it feels a little bit more like trudging through versus making a path through to the other side of paying off your debt. Then there's the snowball method. Step 1, again, list your debts. But instead of interest rate, list them from the smallest amount to the largest amount of dollars owed. Then you're going to pay all your minimums as normal on all of your loans, but any additional money or payments that you throw at your debt, you're going to put it towards the smallest amount so that you build and build and build until the largest amount is the last one that you have left. This gives you small wins along the way if you need something to help you stay motivated and feel like you're getting somewhere, because you're eliminating loans throughout, potentially faster than the avalanche method. In this one, you might potentially pay more interest over time depending on what those interest rates are on each of the loans, but it's typically a more supportive way to approach your debt to make you feel like you're getting somewhere faster. Now, here's what we did. First, we listed our debts. That's always step number 1. If you are not aware of the type of loan that you have, the interest rate on your loan, or the amount on each loan, you're going to be stuck. Awareness is literally step number 1, and that's why list your debts is step number 1 for the 2 major pathways to paying off debt as well. I didn't list them in any particular order. I just listed the amounts, the percentages of interest, and the types of loans. Then we determined what we felt more comfortable throwing more money at over time versus just making the required monthly payment. Initially, we were paying a little bit more on our car loan, like I said, and quickly we determined that one actually was accruing the least amount of interest and would be paid off in 5 years, whether we added more money to it or not. The student loans were the ones accruing quite a bit of interest and were still like 8 to 10 years out from being paid off because of the amount of interest they were accruing, until that went into deferment in 2020. But initially, this was the plan. So then we threw an additional amount at the student loans whenever we could. And that was really for 2 reasons for me. One, it was the most amount of money on a loan, and the interest rates varied so much that it was hard for me to keep track of, and it caused the most anxiety for me. Our car loan was through our local credit union. I have been banking with them since I was in middle school. I trust them. I have a good relationship with them. With the student loans, that's government owned, and that is a little bit scarier for me and caused more anxiety for me. So therefore, that was what we determined was going to take precedence. The way that we attacked it was paying off the loans that would continue accruing interest even in deferment first, which I think are the subsidized loans. Gosh, I don't know. They're subsidized and unsubsidized. One of them keeps accruing interest even in deferment. The other one does not. So we paid off, I think it's subsidized. I don't know. We paid off the one that was going to continue to accrue interest even in deferment. We attacked those first because we had no idea how long deferment would last during the pandemic. So if we could at least take care of those, then we could let the other loans sit there and not accrue interest. And that's what we did initially. But in 2020, when the student loans went into deferment, we focused heavily on cash savings. This was not necessarily a conscious decision at the time. It just kind of happened naturally because we were worried about the future and we didn't know what was going to happen. So we decided if we can save money right now, we should save money right now, because what if there's a time when we don't have access to cash? Paying off the debt, sure, that's great to have less debt, but if we don't have money in the bank, we can't feed ourselves. We can't pay our bills. So we focused on cash savings. Again, not a conscious decision necessarily to abandon the student loans and focus on cash, but one that I'm very grateful for now that we did. All throughout this time, we continued to live below our means, except for 2024, which was primarily because we had 3 payments totaling $14,000 to pay on Jonathan's graduate degree. So that far exceeded our income for that year. But in every other way, we lived below our means. And then how did we get here to 2025 paying off over $15,000 in 1 year? I realized my motivation is to save money. I was not as motivated to pay off the debt as I was to make sure that we had a savings cushion. What that means is if we needed new tires, or if we needed new brakes on the car, or if a travel opportunity came up, I would have much rather paid for those things and only pay the minimum amount on the student loan, which was around $97, which is crazy. It would have taken so long to pay off these loans if we had just paid the minimum amount. It's crazy, the cycle that people who loan money keep people in. That's a whole other conversation. But I realized that I was constantly putting that on hold and making other decisions to pay for things that we needed to pay for, and then prioritize saving that money again versus putting any additional money towards the loans. So at first, we decided in July to pay a large amount, $7,000 on the student loans, and then slowly build our savings back up to a comfortable number and then pay off the rest. But in September, we again had pushed back a couple of things due to expenses that had come up. And I was like, okay, I feel like we're always going to find a reason to hold off on this. We have the money in savings. We are motivated to save money. We should just use that and then build our savings up again, which was really hard to come to that decision because I like to have cash savings. I like to have a lot of cash savings. A lot being relative to what I think a lot is, okay? Because it could be a drop in the bucket to someone else, or it could be an insurmountable amount to someone else. So what I find to be a comfortable amount of savings for us. So I was like, you know what? Okay, we're just gonna pay it off and then build our savings back over time. So we paid that off in September, and we have already started to build our savings back to a comfortable amount. We're still, thousands of dollars away from like where I feel fully comfortable, but we're already starting to accrue that money. And that's what I knew I would be motivated to do. I would be more motivated to save than I would be to pay off my debt. And I think in finances, especially when it comes to paying off debt, there are 3 different types of motivation. Motivation to save, motivation to be debt-free or pay off debt, and motivation to spend or continue living the lifestyle that you are used to living. If you're motivated to save and you have the money in savings, it might be worth it to throw that at your debt and then get back to saving, because then every dollar you save is actually savings versus, sure, I might have $10,000, but I owe 8. Well, so then technically you have 2 kind of. So then you might as well just have 2 and build it back to 10 if you are motivated to save. If you're motivated to pay off debt, you're probably doing great, throwing money at debt to bring that number down. What I would caution you of is to make sure that you have some sort of emergency cushion just in case an unexpected expense comes up. And if you are motivated to spend, I hear you. I see you. And do an inventory of any financial anxiety that you might have, even if you are really enjoying the way that you spend your money and what spending your money provides you lifestyle-wise. But if there's any anxiety attached to that, think of how much better you might feel in spending the money that you're spending if you didn't have debt or weren't accruing more debt. It might not fix everything for you. It might not solve everything for you. You might not even be worried about it. But I highly suggest seeing if there's any string of motivation that you can find towards one of the other directions, or simply continue to spend the way that you're spending and work with a financial advisor to make a plan to also tackle your debt when and however you want to do that. Because doing it alone is the hardest part. Doing it with a partner, a financial advisor, a friend, literally having anyone in your corner helping you along the way is a vital component to this working, no matter what amount of money that you owe. So what's next for us? We are saving, and traveling when we are able to, because that is where we prefer to spend our money. We're getting a lot more aggressive with retirement saving. We just opened our first investment account, which is exciting. We've also converted some of Jonathan's term life insurance to whole life insurance, which is a process I'm still learning a lot about, but apparently is a huge game changer in saving for retirement. And we're getting our cash savings back up to a comfortable amount. So even in these more aggressive retirement savings, insurance policies, all of that automatic savings is only accounting for like $800 a month. Any additional money is being saved in our cash bucket to build that back up to where it was prior to paying off all of this debt and paying off Jonathan's master's degree. So I encourage you, if you were in the middle of a debt payoff journey, if you were in the middle of the planning process for it, I hope some of this information was maybe encouraging or helpful to you. If you have any questions, absolutely leave them below in the comments. As I said, I'm going to leave our financial advisor's information in the description. I get nothing from you working with him other than the knowledge that you are working with a very trustworthy and fantastic human being who knows a lot about money. I'm excited to continue conversations in my normal monthly budgeting, as well as tracking our savings over time for both cash and retirement investments, and learning all of that along the way too. If you're still here, thanks so much for watching. I would love if you would subscribe or just click a like on the video, because it really does help the channel grow. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you sometime soon. Until next time.